we're going to choose a background here. And let's see. Oh, let's go with that. That's kind of too busy. I don't even know what that is. All right, let's go with that. All right, so we're going to talk about DIY maintenance today. Do it yourself. So, owner operators come from all walks of life. Some guys have mechanical skills. They were mechanics, and then they decided to buy a truck. So those guys would be like the best capable or the most qualified, to do DIY maintenance. Because they have all the tools, they have experience, hands-on experience. They have the knowledge. Maybe they went to diesel school. So you'll see these guys are just going gung ho on maintenance on their truck. Other guys have absolutely no mechanical skills whatsoever. I mean, they are the prototypical steering wheel holder, and they couldn't fix a ham sandwich if their life depended on it. So you have this wide range of skill sets. You got guys who are mechanics, and you got guys who are steering wheel holders, and somewhere in between, most everybody else falls in somewhere. So what do you do if you don't have any mechanical skills? Well, I would recommend that you try to improve your mechanical or technical skills. Do you have to? No, you don't have to. You could pay someone to do all this stuff for you. It does get annoying after a while when you have to pay someone for every little thing. It's like, it's tough because you'll see like a missing bolt on your tractor, and you ask the mechanic, "Hey, can you find a bolt and put that on there for me, please?" He's like, "Sure, I could do that." You're like, "Oh, wow, what a great guy." And then you get the bill. You're like, "Well, I just wanted you to find a bolt, or a nut, put it on there." Oh, he did. He charged you $20 for that, and then he's going to charge you another 25 or $50 of labor to put it on. So this gets really frustrating as an owner operator. And you're paying, for every tiny little thing, and it kind of nickel dimes you to death. It's like, it's getting ridiculous, but you got to understand mechanics don't work for free. They got mouths to feed as well, and they have plans to do things with their money, just like you have plans to do things with your money. So they're going to charge you. And tools, mechanic tools are not cheap. Now, the mechanic tools generally they don't generally buy retail tools. I mean, some mechanics do, but some of the best mechanics, like the Detroit Diesel Certified Mechanics, they don't use Walmart tools. They don't use tools from Harbor Freight. No, 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 no. They got the most expensive tools. This is the Snap-on, the Mac, the Matco, the Cornwell tools. These are the professional mechanic tools. You see the little vans all the time. They come to these repair shops, and these guys will buy a toolbox, cost $10,000. So when you ask them to put a nut on a bolt, well, yeah, they're going to, they are going to charge you for every little thing they can, because they got bills to pay. So someone's scrolling high a lot. Get rid of that. That's distracting. All right. So when you think about doing DIY maintenance, there are limitations. That it used to be the owner operators in years past had to be half mechanic and half driver. Because the trucks didn't have warranties back in the Cascadia 125 models, for example. It is, you couldn't hire a mechanic to do everything for you. It used to be guys would be changing their own fuel pumps. They'd be changing DEF pumps. They would be doing DPF filters. They would do their own oil changes, shocks, all kinds of stuff. Nowadays, with the warranties, the extended warranty program on these newer trucks, now you don't want to. There's certain systems you don't want to touch because it's going to be under warranty, for example. So if you're if you have the extended warranty, like the Daimler EM4 warranty, you're not going to want to touch the fuel pump because it's going to be covered under warranty. It's like, well, why be a DIY maintenance guy if it's going to be done by a Detroit diesel certified mechanic for free? It's like, take it to the dealership, have them do it. Same thing with anything with after treatment systems, all under warranty. So I would not recommend you touch systems that are under warranty. So yeah, you could probably change the DUF pump filter yourself, but that system's under warranty. So if you get in there, for example, and you screwing around and you mess something up, well, you could affect the warranty coverage on that truck. So some of these systems you're like, look, that's a warranted system. So I'm not fooling with it. I'll let the Detroit Diesel Certified Mechanic do it, even though I could do it. I don't want to affect the warranty in any way, shape, or form. So you us to do DIY maintenance. You can make the argument in years past, to tools and learn how to do things, but that was before these warranties. Now that the warranties are here, like, well, you better think twice before you touch that truck because that system's probably under warranty. So if you were going to do DIY maintenance, it's like, well, there's half the truck is under warranty. So what items could you do? So, well, you could do the oil change. If you have a large collection pan. I mean, this is going to be like 10 gallons of oil. So you got to have a collection pan that can haul or hold that much oil. You need a facility, a place to do it, because you're probably not going to want to change your own oil at a terminal location or a truck stop. Although I have seen some guys change their own oil at a truck stop before. But I don't know how they did it, but they're out there with gallons and gallons of oil. So if you did change your own oil, you could take that used oil to any automotive quick oil change place, and they should take it free, and they'll recycle it for you. I often changed my own oil in my APU, my diesel-powered APU, and then I would take the used oil into the shop, and the Crete mechanics would take it for me and recycle it for free. It was great. So, you could do that if you wanted to, and I would say you could do your own shocks. I've done that before without too much difficulty. Obviously you can change a lot of the like engine air filter. I see guys pay to do that all the time, and it's like, well, there's an opportunity to save some money there because, first of all, why are you paying a mechanic, you know, 15 minutes or 30 minutes worth of labor to change your engine air filter? If they're if they're a Freightliner Detroit Diesel certified mechanic, they may charge you $50 to $100 labor to change the engine air filter, and it's a 5-minute job. But these guys bill in 15-minute increments, so they don't bill you, 5 minutes. No, they bill you for 15 or 30 minutes. So you got to think about that. You're like, well, that's pretty easy. I could do that myself, and I could save myself a few bucks by not having to pay that labor. And then if you shop around for an engine air filter and you get a good price, you might save money on the part, and then you do it yourself, labor, and you could save anywhere from $50 to $75 just doing that job yourself. And anybody can do it. Anybody with a flathead screwdriver can do it. Yeah, you gotta climb up there a little bit, but it's not hard. Same thing with the cabin air filter. I change my cabin air filter myself, and I do it monthly. That thing gets pretty nasty after a while, and I see where guys don't change their cabin air filter. And it's like, those things are cheap and they're easy. They're very easy to change. Shocks are surprisingly easy to change. They're not bad. And you could buy your own shocks at a discount, do the labor yourself. You could easily save $100, $200 labor right there. You could do your own chassis lube. You go get yourself a Milwaukee M18 powered grease gun, and you go get some tube grease from Walmart, and you just do your own chassis lube. I would like doing it every 5 or 10,000 miles. Just get out my grease gun. I mean, it's kind of fun. Find all your Zerk fittings, and make sure all your grease points have enough grease. You could save yourself, easily $50 going to Speeco and having those guys do it. So there's opportunities to do DIY maintenance, but you got to pick and choose your battles. So what was I going to say? Well, you know, DIY maintenance for some guys is very relaxing. They'll do it on their home time. And it's like, yeah, I could take this into the shop, but I'm going to take the whole day, turn on the radio, just enjoy working on my truck. Some guys love it. It's like it's relaxing. It could be very relaxing. But if you don't have any technical skills, I'm sure it's not relaxing. It's probably very frustrating. But there are different types of maintenance too. There's preventative maintenance, or PMs. There's predictive maintenance, and then there's reactive maintenance. So PMs it was what's scheduled in your book. So if you look at the Freightliner owner's manual and you go back in the back of the book, and it says, okay, change your engine air filter every 300,000 miles. You could follow the book, or you might have a preference to say, well, book says 300,000 miles, but I'm going to do it every 100,000 miles. I've seen guys do that. That's kind of how my preference is. It's like, well, I realize I could go 300 according to the book, but my engine seems to run smoother, and I get better fuel mileage if I change that engine air filter just a little bit more often. So you look at your PM schedule, the back of your owner's manual, and you see where all these things are scheduled to be done. It's like, all right, every 100,000 miles, you got to do this item. Well, 100,000 miles. Okay, let's think about that. So let's just say on average, you're driving at least 10,000 miles per month. Okay, so it's you just had the PM done. It's not due for another 100,000 miles. Well, that's 10 months from now. So you can get out a calendar and put it on your calendar. 10 months from now, you're going to do that PM again. And you just go on down through the list, and you see how, their calendar. It's like, well, I got to do that PM, I got to do a PM in October, I got to do a PM in September, I got another one to do in November, things like that. And maybe, if you're going to take a week off, for example, home time, you just look at your calendar and you're like, oh, I got 3 PMs in this general time frame. I'm just going to knock them all out at the same time. And you just take care of your PMs. So PMs, are very important to keep your truck, from breaking down. So, but, there is wear and tear on the truck. These engines don't last forever. If you do some digging or some research, you'll come across a phrase called B50, B50. And that is the life expectancy of your engine, over 1,000,000 miles. So half the engines may make it to 1,000,000 miles. Half of them won't. So the warranty is only good up to 750,000 miles. So I would recommend that you don't hang on to a truck. I know that's hard, especially if it's your first truck. Guys tend to get attached to the trucks. They got a lot of money invested in those trucks. They know their trucks. They know all the little quirky things their truck does, the breakdown history and everything. And they're like, I know this truck inside out. But once it gets up to 800,000, 900,000, 1,000,000 miles, that damn thing breaks down all the time. Every single system on that truck will break down. It's just because these trucks reach a point where they need to be recycled, and guys are hanging on to these trucks and they keep putting money in it. And it not only is it a money pit, it's a money trap. And the trap works like this. It's like, okay, I just spent $5,000 to get new fuel injectors. Your truck's had 800,000 miles. You put new fuel injectors. You're like, oh, great, life is good. Then next month, you need something else, and it costs 10 grand. And it's like, well, all right, now I got 15 grand invested in this old truck. I realize I probably should start looking for another truck, but I got to get my money back out of this truck. I just put in 15, 20 grand in truck repairs. So I got to keep running. Well, that's the trap. The trap is the mindset that you got to get your money back. It's like, you know, the best thing you could do, and I know it's hard because I've been there myself. The best thing you can do is walk away from that truck. And it's like, you're like, I can't walk away. I got too much invested in it. I'm telling you, it's better for you to take a step back than it is to hold on to that old truck. That old truck is highly unreliable. Something else breaks. So, that it's a money trap. It's a total trap. Guys are trapped in these old trucks. They just, and then you see them trying to sell it, and you're like, they got a truck with 800,000 miles on it, and they want $30,000 for it, and it's like, well, why are you asking so much for that truck? He's like, well, I just got things fixed. That's how much I have invested in it. It's like, yeah, that's sunk costs. You sunk money into a losing truck. That truck is past its prime. It's time to be recycled. So you see that quite often. Guys are holding on to these old trucks. They should let them go. You may have to take a $25,000 hit to your business, kind of down payment, or walk away from an old truck, just so you can get into a more reliable truck that's going to make you more money. So there's a lot that goes into these maintenance of these trucks. Now, I talked about preventative maintenance. Predictive maintenance is like replacing parts before they break. It's like, well, you don't run your tires until they blow. You run them to a certain point, and you're like, oh, I think I'm starting to need new tires, and then you replace your tires. Well, same thing. You could make the same argument for parts. You're like, look, that's the original part. Now it's got 600,000 miles on it. I'm going to replace it before it breaks. Maybe you've done some research and things like that, and you're like, these parts typically break at this mileage point. And you're like, oh, I'm going to do some predictive maintenance. I'm going to be ahead of the game. I'm going to change that part. But that used to be common in the Cascadia 125 models, for example. Guys would be like trying to play it safe, trying to replace parts before they actually break. But now the parts are under warranty, so it's like, well, you don't want to do too much of that predictive maintenance because, why pay for it? It's like, well, if it's going to break, let it break, because now it's under warranty. And then there's reactive maintenance. So we talked about preventative maintenance, talked about predictive maintenance, and then there's reactive maintenance. And reactive maintenance is just like, this is your roadside breakdown. For whatever reason, maybe it's because you didn't do the proper PMs, or there's road conditions just bouncing around. Something broke in your truck, and now you're broke down on the side of the road. Well, now you have to do maintenance. It's like, well, this is like emergency repair. This is going to be a reactive maintenance. So DIY, when we talk about do it yourself, that mostly covers routine preventative maintenance, PMs. It doesn't really apply towards predictive or reactive type maintenance. So you can plan and you can schedule PMs, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to do. There's an opportunity there to save money, and especially easy things like engine air filters, cabin air filters, shock change. You learn how to change out your fuel filters. Davco fuel water separator. I think guys do that. Those are preventative maintenance type things. And then don't touch systems that are under warranty. If you start getting in there and DIY on those systems, you could void your warranty. That would be a costly mistake. So, do you have to do DIY as an owner-operator to be successful? Well, no, you don't. In fact, as the years go by and you become more and more senior owner-operator, where you've got finances built up, and you start becoming fat and happy. That's like, well, I could change them windshield wipers myself, but I'll let the mechanic do it. It's like, oh, I could do that engine air filter myself, but I'll let the mechanic do it. But if you're a scrappy, owner operator who's just getting by, and you're trying to save money on parts. Well, then there's an opportunity there to save money on labor, and you can do some of these things yourself. And it's a great feeling of accomplishment and pride. Say, hey, I did my own preventative maintenance, and guys talk like, where do you go to get this done and that done? You're like, I go home, I do it myself. And they're like, oh, you're so lucky, you have a place to do that, or you have the tools to do that, or you know how to do that. That I continue to work on, even after I continue to try to develop my technical skills. It comes in very handy when you're broke down on the side of the road. You got to be able to troubleshoot. You got to be able to speak intelligently to the mechanic. The more you learn, the more you know, the more beneficial it's going to be to you as a small business owner. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.